Currently, I'm a no. There's about 5 of us that are no. I'm not sure why we're going for this vote right now. I'd love to. The 5 of us would love to. It seems that we've all kind of not been included in some of these discussions, and I think that would be the optimal thing to do.
You can't cut taxes without cutting spending, and they're not really cutting spending. They're cutting taxes by $450 billion and cutting spending by $150 billion. That leaves you $300 billion you're going to add to the deficit compared to the CBO baseline. I know there's some people don't want to use the baseline conveniently after 30 years of using the baseline. In there, they're trying to comfort some of the more moderate members and say, oh, no, we're not doing anything to Medicaid with this bill.
Now what? That's probably the big question.
So
now what?
I feel like we were elected. Who disagrees with work requirements for single able-bodied recipients of Medicaid? Like, that's a 70-30, maybe 90-10 issue in America, and they're afraid to put that in writing? Give me a break.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. That clip you just saw was of Tom Burchett, a Republican from Tennessee, and Thomas Massey, a Republican from Kentucky. Now, Thomas was the last one in the video, and he was saying that there was no way he could possibly vote for an outline, basically, is what they're doing, because there are no specifics in this House bill for a budget. But he could not possibly vote for something that left a $3 trillion deficit. Why didn't they want to put it in writing? And moments later, they called a second vote, and Thomas Massey and Tim Burchett both voted for the framework for the bill to be passed on to the Senate, and the House got their bill across last night. But Thomas, you weren't willing to go for $3 trillion, but you decided to sign on for 4.5. Yeah, we know where your loyalty stands. So I've got some clips here I want to share with you, and I want the Republicans and the Democrats to both pay attention to what's going on here.
I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means? Think of that. Think of that. We have so many ways of making money in this country. We're not going to affect our Social Security. We're not changing it. And I proved that over 4 years. And we're going to do it. It's very unfair to people. They spend their life and they're great citizens and they pay in. We're not going to charge tax to Social Security, the seniors. We're not going to do it. We're not going to charge. And also tax. I say the two things. We're going to have no tax on seniors, Social Security, and we're going to have no tax on tips. They were so afraid. Near the top of the agenda for our historic Republican majorities in Congress is to pass a massive tax cut for American workers and families. Last year, we campaigned across the country in a pledge that I'm sure most of you didn't hear too much about. Pledge to take the Trump tax cuts and make them permanent, and that's exactly what we're doing. In the coming weeks, I'll be working with Congress to get a bill on my desk that cuts taxes for workers, families, small businesses, and very importantly, keeps my promise for a thing called, and I know you didn't hear anything about this, and I'm sure it had no influence on the state, the fact that we won this crazy, massive majority, the state that hadn't been won by a Republican in decades. But I'm sure you haven't heard, but we're going to get it for you. No tax on tips. No tax on tips.
So that was Donald with his promises that he was going to have no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security for seniors. I don't know who else gets Social Security other than maybe the dependent children. And no federal taxes on active duty military, veterans, police, or firefighters, first responders. I kind of like that one. That one's really nice, but geez, I didn't see any of that mentioned at all during the House debates. I heard that they wanted $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, and they were willing to try and offset it with $2 trillion coming out of Medicaid. Yeah. Give it to the rich and take it away from the poor. It's like a reverse Robin Hood. They just don't understand that trickle down doesn't work. Now, main points that we're going to be talking about here, and how the Republican House of Representatives again failed their own people. Because if any of you saw my podcast from yesterday or the day before that showed everybody at the town hall meetings very upset with what was going on, the Republican House of Representatives decided to vote the party line with Donald, number 47, and the House vote was 217 to 215 with one Democrat not voting. And in that resolution, they went with the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. You all know who that's going to. It's not going to you and me. And a $2 trillion cut in federal spending and reductions on the Medicaid Act. These were all things that, remember, he said he wasn't going to touch Medicare or Medicaid? Yeah, so much for that promise. The only other thing that he can talk about, and I'm sure he's not going to talk about it, I'm going to tell you about it. The resolution last night, as it passed, allowed for an increase in the national deficit of $4 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm used to dealing with large numbers, but $4 trillion is a number that you can't just comprehend looking at your own checkbook. I have no idea how he's planning on making that up. I have no idea who, if he tries to make it up, who he's going to take more taxes away from. It surely doesn't look like he's going to keep the promises about dropping the food prices or dropping the gasoline prices. And now it does appear that he's breaking the promise about taking anything out of Medicaid. Social Security is still to be seen. This bill that they passed last night has no real teeth in regards to details. It still has to go before the Senate. The Senate could destroy it, probably most likely will. From what I'm hearing, the Senate Republicans are not liking what they're seeing. They don't believe that the House tried to keep their promise of fiscal conservancy by allowing the $4 trillion in deficit increase. The Senate isn't going to like that. I don't think they're going to go along with it. I've been wrong before. I could be wrong now, but geez, I'd sure hope that they aren't going to be. Senate is expected to review this and potentially modify the proposal in the coming weeks. Now, maybe in the coming weeks we'll see more details, but I just can't imagine how 5 House Republicans said no to $3.5 trillion, but then signed on to $4.5 trillion in cuts and an additional $4 trillion in budget deficit. With that, folks, I'm going to call it a night. I want to thank everybody that's here, my people from around the world. Again, I'm astonished at the number of cities that I'm in. Thank you so much. If you would, just hit the like button. You don't have to subscribe. I would love to see my subscribership grow, but hit the like button. It helps my algorithm. It gets me spread out. It helps me get this message across to more people around the world. So with that, I'm going to thank you and wish you all a wonderful evening. Good night.